The Adult Ballet Studio is a podcast featuring conversations with the empowering voices of the adult ballet community, a world where passion has no limits and dreams can take flight. My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm an adult ballet dancer and your host. Welcome to the studio. Happy Tuesday and happy March, everybody. Welcome to the Adult Ballet Studio. We have such an exciting guest in the studio today, and I can't wait for you all to hear from her. Dani Vitale is an award-winning pro dancer, choreographer, and creative director. She was born and raised near Cleveland, Ohio, which I was so excited to talk to her about because so was I. While growing up in Cleveland, she started dancing at a young age at a local dance studio, studying jazz, musical theater, and classical ballet before discovering the world of hip-hop and freestyle. She moved to LA, where she's currently based, and built an incredibly successful career starting just after high school. She booked her first professional dance gig with the hit Disney movie Camp Rock 2, and she started touring the world as a backup dancer for top artists. She's performed with Katy Perry at the Super Bowl and has worked alongside Halsey, two experiences she shares with us during this interview as well. She's also worked with many other artists, choreographing and creative directing world tours, award show performances, and music videos. Beyond all of her accolades, which I could go on and on about, she's done some incredible work for the dance community, advocating on the boards of SAG-AFTRA and Dancers Alliance for fair industry wages and for dancers to be respected as athletes. As an Under Armour athlete in 2017, she was able to return to her hometown dance studio, the Dance Stop in Cleveland, and completely renovate the studio to make sure it could continue to be a safe, inspiring, and creative place for its students. She talked about her best advice for becoming a well-rounded dancer, how to conquer self-doubt and use it as your superpower, how to stay motivated despite all of the rejection and challenges in the dance world, and how instructors can build an inclusive environment in their studios. She also shares some fun backstage memories from tours and a new project that she's currently working on. She had so much advice to pass on for professional and amateur dancers alike, and she was also so much fun to talk to. By the way, we got really excited talking about dance, and there's some strong language in this episode. It's all in good fun, of course, but just a heads up for anyone listening at work or with sensitive ears. All right, I hope you'll enjoy hearing from Dani as much as I did. Check it out.
Hello.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for reaching out to Tony and setting this up. I was so excited.
I'm so glad to meet you. I've been a really big fan of your work for a long time, so I'm really happy to be talking to you. I have so many questions.
Oh, thank you. Let's do it.
Well, I just wanted to, I guess I wanted to start off because I know I saw on Instagram you did this really cool project at the end of last year for the League of Legends opening ceremony in Seoul. And it looked so cool. You said it involved 25 dancers and a bunch of different artists and augmented reality. And
it's one of a performance of that stature is such a dream thing. I think, I've been so artist driven and, things with musicians like music videos and television performances. So to do something that's so it encompasses all of that, but it's just on the biggest scale is something that you as a choreographer, I don't really you don't dream of stuff like that because you don't know what exists. It's the Super Bowl halftime show, the Olympics, and then League of Legends. So, it's not something that you're oh, I want to do that this year. It's so when it comes onto your plate, it's holy shit. So I feel I don't really appreciate the magnitude of it or the grandiosity until it's done. And then when I talk to people like you and I look back at it, right now I'm currently trying to edit clips together from the show to put it on my Instagram, but it's just so big and long, and it has all these amazing parts where I'm how am I supposed to put this out on my Instagram, but not do it in 20 posts, because it's just such a big thing. But it takes, once we wrap League of Legends, everyone has a couple weeks of downtime, but we start next year's a month after already, starting to plan. So it is a year's long process to get this show off the ground. And I don't really come in until the 6 months, maybe 8 months prior to the show date. but, we do weekly meetings for about like 8 months for this one 15-minute
Right.
performance. And it's just something that is just it's otherworldly because it involves so many different people and so many other departments. It's not just, hey, put these steps together and hire dancers and then let's go to Korea. It's so many thought through processes of just like, okay, well, why are we choosing 25? Why not 20? Why not 30? Because then you have budget and creative and wardrobe. And then, all while I'm trying to hold 25 dancers that I want, but then, other projects happen. So then it's like, I have Sally booked, but then Sally just booked a tour with Celine Dion or Cher, and then she's leaving. Then I have to replace Sally. And there's like so much more to it than just like creating the show itself, which I think is actually more work than creating the steps sometimes, which is always funny to tell people where they're like, how is it creating it? I'm like, honestly, I was just trying to make it happen rather than creating it. That's like the
Right.
last thing to think about.
Right, it's such a big project, and that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna ask because I know that you've done the Billboard Music Awards and some other big
Mhm.
award shows too, and I was curious what it's like choreographing or putting together an event like that where you're managing so many different artists and so many different acts versus just one artist on tour on a music video. It sounds like there are so many moving parts to things like that.
Yeah, I explain it to people in like the simplest terms of like, if you're always used to going to the same kind of restaurants, they have 5 starters, 5 pasta dishes, and then 5 entrees. If you're always used to going to those types of restaurants, like you're like, cool, I'm gonna get this, this, and this. And you have this like flow of what feels like normal and comfortable. And sometimes maybe you get 3 starters, like you have a flow, but then you go to a restaurant. Uh, I go to this restaurant once a year with League of Legends where there's like 40 starters and then another type of salad section. And then there's, antipasta, and then there's pasta, and then there's an entree. Like, so then you're given this massive menu and it's like, oh my gosh, like what do I do with all this? Like it's so exciting. It's sometimes very overwhelming because, on projects I could only dream of having 25 dancers. Now I have it and I'm like, oh my God, like I only have a week, or in this last project, I only had 4 days of rehearsal to
Yes.
put this process together, or to put the show together with the dancers in the room. And then all the work up to that depends on me and my choreography team of hopefully prepping and conceptualizing something that, fingers crossed, works in a room of 25. So like I don't get to we talk about this all the time of like technology helps so many other assets of work and jobs, but like we don't have tools like other jobs do to like previs choreography.
Right.
You just have bodies. Like I don't have a software where like, yeah, I can maybe work out formations on certain things, but like you need bodies in the room to create art like that. And when you're only given a small amount of time, it is really overwhelming. You're like, wow. I look back at it now, I'm like, damn it, if I only had one more day, I could have made that formation cooler. And I think once I started choreographing this type of work, I've had so much more appreciation for people who do stuff like this all the time, because I'm like, wow, they only had X amount of days to put on something like this. Like, yeah, in a perfect world, I would have loved 2 to 3 weeks like I get for a tour. And I don't get to do that. A lot of the other departments do get that amount of time, but choreography doesn't. And it sucks, but it's also like the addicting part of it where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I only have 4 days. Yeah. And then, I think there was 11 artists. And I mean, this year was crazier than I've ever done before. And, my team was split in, 4 different rooms. And I had one of my assistants with one artist, the other assistant with this artist. Then I had another assistant with this group of dancers while I was with this other dancer. And then I had the dance captain with the understudies, and everyone was just all over the place. And I tried to stay as removed as possible to make sure I knew what was going on. Um, so I would say that's the craziest part of it all. Where as compared to an award show, I can actually be a little bit more involved in certain things because it's smaller. You're not dealing with that many people per se.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's such a
Yeah.
cool project, and that that gives me so much stress because I'm a dance instructor at, like, a local studio, and we
Yeah.
did, like, a full run through of the show the day of the show, and I was stressed about that, and so thinking about having just 4 days for something so huge like that is crazy.
It's so nuts. And then you have to like talk to wardrobe about what the quick changes are. And then you have to like communicate that to them of like what dancer is on what side of stage and what outfit they need, in what quick change area. And then I have like lighting talking to me being like, hey, at this part of the song, our dancer's right here. And I'm like having to like go and remember where Julie was on stage, right? To make sure there's a spotlight there. And then I'm talking to AR and making sure that like the dancers don't, mess up the calibration with wherever the sensors are of this. And then it's so many different departments rely on choreography at the end. So it's like, yes, creating and conceptualizing it before, and then you're in the room with the talent trying to make something of it and cool, and trying to also communicate your vision to 25 people in 4 days. Like, I've been sitting with the project and my team for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I understand, the narrative of it. I understand the music, and they haven't been in those meetings. So it's like crash course. Here's the creative, understand it, learn the steps, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it's very overwhelming. And then when one thing goes wrong, everyone's like, the choreography, like, what did they do? And I'm like, well, sorry, there was a camera that was a robot that was in the way of 14 of them leaving stage. So that's why they couldn't leave. There's just like,
Yeah.
it's hilarious, but I love it. I love it.
That's so funny. Well, that's such a cool project. I just wanted to ask about that because I just saw the picture
Thanks.
on Instagram and it looked so cool.
Thank you for reminding me that I have to post
Oh, you're
those
welcome.
videos. Oh God.
No, but I know that you're in Ohio right now visiting family, but you live in LA, right?
Yes. LA
Okay.
based. Yeah.
Awesome. And I know that I was reading a little bit about you for the interview. I know that you moved to LA like right after high school. And I'm curious what that transition was like from Ohio, because I did the same thing after school moving to New York. And it was such a big transition. I had never been anywhere outside of the vicinity of my hometown. So
Yeah.
how did you, take that risk and what was that all like?
I mean, you get it. Being born and raised in Ohio, it's a specific, especially back, in the 90s and early 2000s, like Ohio, I always make a joke, we are like 10 years behind of, pop culture, lifestyle, fast paced, like we are just behind in everything, which I love because, I think the values and morals that we absorbed here are much different from that of other states. But to that point, it was such a culture shock, leaving little small town Ohio. And again, like you, I've only regionally traveled for dance competitions and things. And, I've been to New York, but when you're younger like that, you don't really understand like what it takes to be living there. Cause I would go to dance camps or things and I'd be in a hotel and there'd be food and water and, it'd be close to the location of where I was training. So when I left home at 17, it was just crazy because I was like, wait, I'm a full adult now and I have to figure out how to, you know, feed myself, wash my clothes, pay my bills. There wasn't like that transitional period of college or some sort of program that would, assist you in that. And, my parents raised me very independent. So there were certain skills I had that, other kids probably didn't have. But again, it was a full slap in the face of, whoa, here we are. We're 17 years old and we've fully live amongst, full blown adults. And
Right.
that that was interesting, and I had my parents' emotional and mental support beyond, but I did not have the financial support. My family didn't have the means to help me in the way that, everyone would wish and dream and hope. Looking back, I'm so grateful that I didn't have that because it forced me to really have that hustle mentality of working any and every job possible. Like while I was training in LA, I worked at two different restaurants and then, taught at a local studio and then trained, 50 hours a week or something like that. So I learned that mentality straight off of the high school graduation stage. And that is something that, you can't teach or implement in a young adult. And I was just at the time angry and frustrated of like, well, why do I have to work all these jobs? And my other friends, get help from their parents. And I was very angry for a very long time. But now looking back, I'm very grateful that I had that experience. But it was very, very hard, very hard. But it's also nice always having home to go to. And my mom and dad always reminded me that, like, don't kill yourself out there. Do it to a point in which maybe if you can't or you need a break, like home is always here and Ohio is always Ohio. And I love coming back here and I love giving back to, you know, students that go to the dance studio I was raised at, and I teach here all the time, and I try and give them a sense of hope or dream that like it is possible and you can do it. I know because when you're here, it feels so far fetched. When you watch these TV shows or interviews or thing, it's like, oh well, I can't do that, and it's like, well, I did it, and you can do it, and it's all up to you. I didn't have anyone holding my hand. I did have support from my family and a couple of my friends, but that was it. And I still figured it out somehow.
Yeah, you did, and you've had an amazing career in LA. I can't wait to talk about that in a little bit, but I was just curious because
Yeah.
I love how much you rep your hometown and how much you rep
Yeah.
Ohio. You come back to teach all the time, like you said. So was Ohio and like sort of that local studio scene your first introduction to dance? I know you sort of started with ballet and then kind of migrated into the world of hip hop and freestyle later
Yeah.
on.
Growing up, you learn, I mean, in again, the 90s and 2000s, like I just knew out here in Ohio, ballet, Broadway, theater, and that was and jazz and like jazz theater and company work. I only knew that asset of dance. And so that was all I knew that existed. So I was like, okay, I want to do that. So I, trained rigorously with ballet companies when they would come into town, or I'd go and do summer camps. And then, I did like a rockette camp. And then when I realized I wasn't going to grow taller than 5'6", I was like, cool, checking that off. But then I was like, okay, I love musical theater. I love plays and all of that. So, then I started exploring singing, and I was like, I don't really love singing, but I love like the core work of it. So I started to just dive into what I thought only existed. And then as I got older, music videos started to, be more in my face on, TRL and MTV when I get ready for school. And I started to see backup dancers more and, Darren's dance grooves. And I was like, whoa. But my studio didn't really offer that. We had a hip hop teacher and we did hip hop, but there was no knowledge behind it. It was just more like street jazz and like that kind of feel around it. We weren't like training in jazz funk per se or hip hop. And when we'd go and do conventions, it really wasn't a thing either. There was always like specific studios that were really good at it. And we were definitely not one of those studios. We were like the technical, like very company based. And as I got older and life started to progress and more music videos, and I would see more studios that were trained like that, I was envious of that training and knowledge that these kids had. So that's when I like went out to LA for the first time when I was 14 or 15 for a 2-week program. And that's when just all the lights went off. I was like, holy shit, there is a whole other world that's not Ohio and New York or Chicago. And I think I look at my little head just always looking towards the east. And then when I went to LA for this dance competition and stayed, I was like, holy shit, what is this whole other world out here? And I was so just blown away by it. And I felt that I fitted in more with that type of dancer. Like I loved the structure of a ballet dancer, but I also loved like breaking the mold of that. So I was like, I don't know if this is like the type of environment for me. Like I kind of like to think outside the box and challenge the norms. And I could see maybe me butting heads with like a ballet company director and not being like the best company member. So then when I saw that LA existed, I was just obsessed with pursuing that. And from sophomore year on, that was just I was like, I just need to go there, need to go there. What's out there? How do I get there? How do I train? And I knew my training wasn't up to par. So I just was obsessed with trying to find some sort of program that could take me in and basically get me ready to exist out there as a hopeful professional dancer.
And I love that you went to that, intensive in LA when you were
Yeah.
like 12 and decided you want to do this. And then you did. You took the risk and you moved out to LA when you were so young. So what was the first dance, like big dance job that you booked once you got to LA? And what was that whole experience like?
My first very big, like my first big dance job was the Camp Rock 2 promo commercial. It was a promo commercial for on Disney for Camp Rock 2.
Oh my gosh, such a throwback. I love it.
Such a throwback. And we did It's On, and the choreographer was Chucky Claypow. And I got that job because a girl that I was living with at the time trained with Chucky. It was again like such a LA experience of knowing someone who knew someone, obviously having the talent to back and the personality to back it up, but I got it through a relationship. And, I had to audition and do all that. And my talent stood up to that relationship. But like being on this, I think there was like 40 or 50 dancers. And a lot of the dancers I'd seen in classes and I knew who they were. So it was like such a mind blowing moment being in the room with a lot of like Dana Wilson and Jillian Myers. Like they were dancers on this job. And at like 18 or 19 years old at that time, I was like, what is this? And that's where I was like, oh, this is incredible. And it was like on the Santa Monica Pier, and the commercial ran on Disney, and it was just such a cool first job. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's like the dream, to be on Disney Channel,
Yeah.
especially when you're that age that you're like,
yes, and like Disney was still cool, and
yeah,
like
exactly.
cousins and stuff were still watching Disney Channel, and Camp Rock was like, the thing. So that was really cool for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember teaching myself the moves to that in my living room. So that's awesome. And was there anything, after you booked that job and started sort of building your career, was there anything that surprised you about working as a professional dancer in Hollywood, or anything that you didn't expect that sort of took you by surprise?
Oh my God. I mean, was there anything? Was there like that? Yes, everything did. There was never a time where I walked into a situation or audition or job where I was like, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen. Like even now, it's just like we have this joke with my choreography team where I'm like, all right, here's this job we're doing. What shit are we going to have to deal with? Like there's always just like, and I think that is what I'm obsessed with, and that's why I love working in this industry is you can never expect anything. You can never anticipate anything. There's always this crazy curve that's going to be thrown at you. I feel like I constantly live on a reality game show. And to me, that's the exciting part. I know a lot of people don't love that, but I love that. And every chapter of my career from when I first started working, I would say as a dancer, it was always something. It was like, okay, I have to fit into this mold of a commercial dancer that does, commercial work. And I need to have this color hair and this type of training and this kind of headshot. And then you realize that like you don't have to fit into that mold, that actually should be more well-versed. And then once you become more well-versed in training, then people don't know what to hire or cast you as. So it's like this constant mind game of like, how am I like producing myself per se, as like what am I trying to be known as or known for or hired for? And I think that was always like the roller coaster of, all right, this year, what do I want to accomplish? Do I want to work more tours and more jobs with artists that have like heavy dancing? Or do I want to do more TV work that's more technical and that side? So when you try and do it all, it just never works. You have to be like so specific. So I think that was the thing that always threw me for a loop. Was like, wait, I thought I was doing the right thing. And then you're not working. Then you're like, what do I need to do? What's wrong with me? Yeah.
That's so interesting. And I know one thing that I love about your work, I mean, I love so many things about your work, but you're such a versatile dancer and choreographer. I've heard you say before in interviews, giving advice to dancers who are maybe auditioning to make yourself as marketable as possible and to sort of become at least a surface level expert in so many different styles of dance you can deliver whatever's asked of you. And you've really accomplished that with your dancing and also with your choreography. So I was just curious what advice you would give, for any dancers, especially young dancers who might be listening to this podcast. They want to become more well-rounded. Where should they start, or what steps should they take?
There's so many tools and materials out now that I didn't have when I was training. And for me, I think what I'm so fortunate of was being in rooms and situations that so much was thrown at me, so many different styles, so many different teachers, so many different educators. And I was always uncomfortable in the sense of I was never a master at anything. Like I look at kids back then and even now where they're like so good at contemporary. But then when you see them in a jazz funk class or when you see them somewhere else, they are not the person you watched in that room. And I think there's a service to that, but I think there's also personally, I think there's a massive disservice in that, because unless you are going to just be this amazing this contemporary dancer, and then a contemporary choreographer, what else are you going to do? How else, like, what if there's no work in that time or 1 year, if there's not shows like that being created, how else are you going to make money? How else are you going to eat? So that's how I've looked at it always, as like a survival mentality of, I never want to be out of work, and I never want to be out of work where it's kind of my fault that I didn't learn a certain style. Like, the worst is when I would see friends of mine who maybe weren't trained in point. And then there's like all these point jobs for 3 months. But then I see them sitting there like so mad at themselves that they didn't take the time or the energy to learn the skill of point work, because if they did, they could have been working. And I never wanted to be that dancer sitting on the sideline while everyone was working in a specific style, and I wasn't able to do that. So I always put myself in the room of every type of style or anything, so I could at least have a elementary knowledge of it. Whether I would get hired or not is a whole other, thing, but I at least always wanted to know what was going on. And there was a lot of jobs back then where I'd be hired under Mandy Moore or Brooke Lipton on certain shows, like for Glee or something, where they would hire you as, Dani, she's a great dancer, she's a great performer, and she's, professional to work with. But then on the show, they'd be like, all right, guys, well, this week we're roller skating. And that's where I go back to the whole reality show aspect of it, where it's like, sometimes you were hired as, I was actually hired as Dani the human and not Dani the dancer. And then you were just expected to perform at this high level of like, all right, well, this week we're tangoing. This week we're doing this. And if you didn't have a base knowledge of it, you were the one that looked like an asshole and probably weren't hired back the next week for a Glee episode because you didn't know how to do that style. Or the show Shake It Up at the time, Rosero McCoy, I owe a lot to him too. One week we're doing 70s disco. The next week we're doing, country line dancing. And if you don't have knowledge of those things, you're going to make a fool out of yourself on these jobs. But if you're the dancer who knows basic information or basic, I say fake it till you make it, knowledge of it, then you're always going to be known as that dancer who, like, wow, she knows how to do freaking anything. I can put her in any room and she's going to pull it off and know what to do. So I always just scream that from the rooftops. The more styles you know and that you're educated in, again, you don't have to be a professional at it, but you're just going to be able to say yes to so much more than if you didn't. It also transpires now into choreography. There's so many times where I'm like, they're like, hey, can you choreograph Vogue? And I'm like, yeah. Can you choreograph tango? Yeah. Am I the best at it? Absolutely not. And I will go and seek out those professionals that are, professional at it. And I will learn from them and quickly refresh my palette. But like, I can at least say yes to everything now.
That's such an important skill, and probably
Yeah.
part of it is also just having sort of that risk-taking mentality of just saying yes to things and then learning really quickly as you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know
Yeah.
you've also mentioned in interviews, kind of speaking of auditioning and kind of giving advice to younger dancers, there's obviously a lot of rejection in the industry too, and you mentioned that you're someone who always wants to keep working, and you've really done that. But I heard you talking in another podcast interview. This was a couple of years ago, so things might have changed. But you mentioned that you've been on, thousands of auditions, and you've really only booked like a handful of jobs through those auditions. It's more just word of mouth and friends of friends.
Yeah.
So how do you keep pushing and keep working and finding jobs despite some of that rejection and not let it just sort of get you down? Like, what's that mental process like?
Oof. I mean, it is really funny, and handful of jobs is being like exaggerative. Like I could literally probably count on like one hand, which I guess is a handful of things that I've actually booked off of an audition. And, you know, I think I've just, instead of getting down about it and victimizing myself about it, I've just been like, okay, cool. I'm not great at auditions. I'm not the type of performer that loves to stand out in that way. So I've just never been the like, look at me, look at me. I can deliver the highest quality product, but I'm not like the person that stands out in that way. I also don't love the dancer that's like that. And that's again just me. So I've looked at myself and been like, all right, you aren't the best in the room in an audition. But what do you have that other people don't? I have a work ethic that is, uncomparable to some. I have, a personality. I have, you know, an ability to connect with people on a level that a lot of people don't. So I'm like, okay, let me take my superpowers and how do I make that work for me? So when I was on jobs, I just was always, so professional. And again, this is how I was trained and raised. So it wasn't something like I had to work on, or it was just me, always being on time, always being respectful, never talking, always showing up. Um, I was just always the star student. And then I became the star assistant. And again, like it sounds crazy. Like, well, how does that stand out? The type of people that move to LA and want to be in this industry actually a lot of the time aren't the best people. And what I was thinking was like, when people would be like, wow, you're such a joy to work with. You're so amazing that I can rely on you. I was like, well, isn't this the norm? Shouldn't this be how everyone is? And then as I started progressing in the industry, you do see how unique that is. And it's sad because I'm like, you actually don't really have to try that hard. If you are just a good person, a good student, a good employee, a good worker, people want to hire you. And I would say that is so hard to come around now when I have to hire. So if you could figure out that way to get work, it's much more fulfilling than like having to exhaust yourself in auditions. But it is again way harder because when there are auditions, you're like, fuck, and if I don't have the connection, you're like, well, I'm not gonna get this. And I just chalk it up. I'm like, whatever, it's fine. I'll figure out how to get some other job.
Yeah, but that is really important advice. I mean, when you have good character, when you're a good person, people want to work with you. They want to be around you. So,
Yeah. You it's just like a different skill. It's like, and then, if you're in the room with a dancer for a really long time, like I don't want to work with the one that stood out in the room. I want to work with the person who's like been hired repeatedly from the same choreographer. Like I don't want to, like when I look at resumes now, this person might be amazing in the room, but I look at their resume and I'm like, oh, they've worked for 8 choreographers, but only one time. That to me is a red flag. I
yeah.
want to see if you've done, 6 or 7 jobs with Mandy or 6 or 7 jobs with Nick and RJ. Like, I wanna see that you've been a repeat client, not just a one time, because that to me is like, you were hired for one
Right.
audition because you were great, but then you weren't great on the job.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And you are such a good person who has such good character. You can tell it exudes from you. So I'm sure you
Thanks.
are such a joy to work with. And
Thanks.
you've done a lot for the dance community as well.
My
Just
God, so much.
yeah. I know that you fought really hard for professional dancers to make industry standard wages and to be taken seriously as athletes and paid accordingly. You worked on the board of SAG-AFTRA and Dancers Alliance, if I'm correct, to
Yes,
advocate
yes.
for those things. Could you talk about some of that work, why it's important to you and some of the changes you've been able to make?
Yeah, I mean, I have an ear to ear smile of you even bringing that up because I feel like a lot of dancers now don't have the knowledge who have put these rates in place and who has been on the front lines per se of these board meetings with these huge executives to put these rates in place. And it hurts because I'm like, wow, I've given so many years to like get these rates to a place and get dancers respected and treated as such, where these kids have no idea where these rates have come from and they don't, respect the elders who have like done this. And and then there were people before me that did it, and I'm aware of that. So I appreciate you asking this question. um it mattered to me when I was like in the thick of my career and I was working constantly, and I was working at in the like highest caliber rooms, like the Super Bowl and national commercials and the biggest tours, and I was noticing just this overall theme with the people who I also worked with these rate implementations. And it's like, why are we getting nothing, and why are we getting treated like absolute shit? And who are the people to make these changes? And at the time, it was me and a group of dancers who were also in the same position. We were all in the same types of rooms to actually be able to say something. But what came with that was, if you do voice these concerns, you are probably also going to have a mark on your back or a target on your back to maybe not be hired because you are the one speaking out. So it was this balancing act of not trying to be these people that are just pointing out the flaws in every work environment. It was like, okay, how can we just make this a little bit better? Where I feel like now dancers are like, this this is not okay, this is not okay, this is not okay. And they go on Instagram and they just like, shout from the rooftops of what's wrong. But I'm like, that's not how you actually make change. And that's where I think there's been a huge gap in rate changes or how dancers are treated because the process has to be professional as well. So going back to all these things, the music video lifestyle was very rough because we were all doing music videos for big name artists and getting paid nothing. And the conditions were so grueling, but it was also at a time where if you were touring with an artist, you were expected to do these music videos. Like, you already know the choreo, you're on tour with them, and we're going to get off tour, we're going to shoot these two music videos for these two songs, and we're going to keep going. So you kind of really didn't have a choice to say no or yes to them because you were, on this path with this artist. And that's when it just got really grueling. I'm like, we need to figure out at least like a minimum. Like we can't be doing music video and have no lunch, no chairs on set, and be making $50 for, a 20-hour a day. Like this is actually just not okay. And instead of just complaining about it and making people hate dancers more, let's actually write down like then we got with SAG and we have amazing people like Danielle Town and Dana Wilson and Ava Bernstein and I mean so many amazing people who were in this room alongside me. And we sat down with the SAG-AFTRA reps. They helped us with their whole legal team, and we sat down with these music video labels and music labels, Sony and UMG and Warner, and we outlined a lot of the problems. And they didn't really know that we had these issues because we, as dancers, have just done it, and no one's really said anything eloquently to present to them. It's just been like complaining, and then dancers are getting fired. So we went about it in a really professional, palatable way, and I think that's why change was able to be made. But it took oh my god, it took so many meetings and hours and so much to at least get a bare minimum. And we did it with a lot of different assets, and I do it with the live television contract, and there's so many different contracts. But now I've really focused on also helping our choreographers, at least get recognition. We don't even have a IMDb drop down title. Like we
Yeah,
are
it's
in
crazy to me.
other crew or like it is so crazy. Like, and I am so respectful and appreciative of every job on a movie or TV show, but like that the seventh PA for the radio driver, like drop off and pickup return has a title, but like a choreographer doesn't. And it's just
Wow.
like so wild to me. So those things I'm focusing on more, but my dancer rights and all that stuff, I have never hired dancers that has even been a minimum DA job. It's always above. So every job I do get, I implement the dancer rate in my own way and their hours. Like I hold my standards when I hire dancers or have dancers on a job, like above even minimum. And a lot of dancers and people I work with know that. And I think a lot of the time they do go to me because of that. And I have a reputation that I always treat my dancers as how I want it to be treated. Um, so I think also change starts there as like, the fish rots from the head is the saying. So yes, we can put these rates in place, but I was excited to then be in charge in the room to actually implement the rate change and the treatment change and stuff like that.
Just hearing all the work that you're doing in the dance field, it means so much, I'm sure, to any professional dancer or choreographer out there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I think, it translates as well because a lot of our audience are amateur dancers who may not be familiar with the world of professional dance so much. But I think even so, there are so many, barriers to entry in the dance world, and it can feel kind of exclusive at times, whether, it's your financial situation or your body type or just your background. So I'm curious, kind of going along with that, what would you say to dancers who are encountering any of those challenges, the ones we just talked about or, otherwise, and might have self-doubt or feel like they don't
Mm.
belong or feel misunderstood in dance? How can they sort of make space for themselves and advocate for themselves?
This is a tough one because I'm from a cutthroat Italian family. So I think a lot of kids these days, and this is going to sound really like crass, but the victim mentality can only get you so far. Whereas when you do, I think self-doubt and then victimizing yourself are two things that I think kids these days get very muddy. And I think a lot of people, again, are dealt different. Everyone's dealt a different hand, but we're in such a really great place right now with acceptability and people not being so blindfolded or blind, like blind with seeing people of so many differences. And again, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I do think that if you take self-doubt and make that your superpower in a way, and okay, I'm feeling doubtful about, I don't know, let's say body image. Who are people that love and accept that? Go take with those people. Who are people who surround yourself with the people who do accept whatever you're going through, or things that you have self-doubt about. And I think if you search there rather than searching for everyone to accept you, it's going to feel much safer, because not everyone accepts everyone. Like, of course, that's the goal, but I think that is like when we leave this planet, that's where that happens. And here it's like, where can I find my little niche of people who do love and accept me? And not everyone's going to do that. Like, everyone doesn't love and accept me of how I work or how I communicate or how I create. So I respect them for not, you know, I'm trying to watch my language. I respect them for not fucking with what I have, but I'm going to surround myself with the people who do. So I think it's just kind of trying to navigate the perspective of that, and not expecting or hoping that everyone is going to accept you, because it's just not. It's not. You can't be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. And it's okay. And just to search for the people high and low who do. And I still every day do. And it's hard. There's a lot of times I just don't work well with people. And I'm like, oof, I love what they do, and I love and I want to work, but we don't mesh, and that's okay. And I'm just gonna leave that there, and that's that. I'm not gonna fixate it on it. I'm not gonna go down a spiral hole about it. Moving on, let's find someone else who wants to, you know, work well with me. I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers the question. It's just so
No, it does. I love that. I actually don't think that sounds crass at all. I mean, I think that's such an important perspective, because it's like, it's okay to have self-doubt, obviously, but at the same time, rather than sitting around and sort of wallowing in it, figure out how you can use it as your superpower and
yeah.
help you move forward and sort of find your crew.
Exactly. Exactly. Because everyone always finds a crew. And it's like so cool where I have seen students come to me crying after class. No one will hire me. I'm too short. Let's just say that. Like, I'm too short. I'm too short. Okay. You think you're short. Great. You are 5'2". You maybe are short for certain jobs. Yes, 100%. But there are jobs that height doesn't matter. But then also it's like, be realistic. I hate when, like, let's say someone that's 5'2" wants to dance for, I don't know, let's say someone who would never hire someone, not never, but for a certain thing, right? So it's like, yeah, if you're 5'2" and you want to dance for who's super tall, let's say Chris Brown, and the thing is to do partnering with Chris. Like, of course, you're probably not going to go on tour as a 5'2", let's say male, with Chris Brown if he's whatever 6 foot something. Like, be realistic. Don't hate on the job. Don't hate on the dancers that book it, and don't hate on the artist. Just like, that is what it is. Or like, if you're a male that's shorter than a female artist, and let's say you have to partner them, be realistic. Okay, I'm probably not going to do that tour, but maybe there'll be a music video that you could do. Like, I think that's where it gets annoying, where people are just like, me. I'm not going to get hired for that. Okay, that's fine. But there's another job waiting somewhere that you could have probably gotten hired on if you weren't fixating on this one thing.
Yeah, exactly. Don't have blinders on. There's so many
Yeah,
opportunities out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, we've talked about how much good you're doing for the dance community. I know we talked about Ohio at the beginning, and you went back to your hometown several years ago now, I think, to renovate your local
Yes.
dance studio. I love that story so much. Could you just talk about what that meant to you and why you decided
Oh,
to do it?
it meant the world to me, and it's honestly the best thing I've ever done in my life, and I think that I will ever do. Um, and the stars aligned in it's such a perfect way. When I got the opportunity, when I was the face of Under Armour in 2017, to get a budget, a small budget to do something good. They were like, here's a budget to make a project, and you could do whatever you want with it. You could go travel the world and create content, and that's what a lot of like my other people who were signed as well did. They like went on a boat trip and took photos, and like they all did stuff like that to create content. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be given an opportunity to have a little bit of money and to have a platform of content, I'm going to fucking redo my dance studio. Because at that point, Lisa was like, I'm going to close. I have to close. I can't afford to keep the doors open. I haven't taken a paycheck, blah, blah, blah. And I was like over my dead body. So there was a 2-week period where they were closed from summer to fall semester. And I didn't tell Lisa, I didn't tell anyone. I lied and said, hey, can I have the studio for 2 weeks? I'm doing a project. I just can't have anyone come in. I just made up this whole thing. And so I changed the lock. She's like, absolutely, whatever you need. She was so grateful and thankful for everything I've done. So I got my friends, like mom, dad, my brother, my cousins, my best friends from high school. And we all for 2 weeks just gutted it. I got all new flooring, mirrors that actually touched the floor. I got all new bars. I repainted everything. I cleaned everything. I got new ceilings, put new lighting. And I just gave the whole place a facelift as much as I could in 2 weeks. It felt like I was on a home renovation show.
Right.
And I got them new furniture. I mean, it had the same carpet in that room that was there when I was 9 years old. And I was like, Lisa, and she didn't have the capital to do it. So we did this whole thing. And then, I revealed it on opening day for the studio. And it was just the best thing that I've ever done. And, she was able to bring a lot more business in, and people were actually wanting to go to a studio that was, had a facelift. And I was hoping just to bring more positive people to that studio, and she's done a really incredible job building it back up from the ground again. And yeah, it's just the best. And I still teach there all the time and set pieces. And yeah, it's like my little home away from home.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that so much. I remember watching it unfold on your Instagram stories, like, way back when you were
Oh,
doing it.
I
So
love
it's
that.
cool to hear, in person. So thank you for sharing that. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of leads into one of the questions I had for you too, because I know that you teach there all the time. It's the Dance Stop in Cleveland, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So shout out to the Dance Stop.
Yeah. Shout out
Um,
to dance stuff.
yes. I know you teach there all the time, and I know you've taught other master classes and stuff. And so I'm curious, from the perspective of an instructor, can you talk about the importance, or I guess the responsibility that a dance teacher has in investing in their students and kind of helping them grow, just mentally and physically? What can they do to build an inclusive environment?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's such an important role, and I owe almost everything to a lot of my teachers. I have another teacher. Her name's Courtney at Cleveland City Ballet or Cleveland City Dance, and same thing. Like the lessons that those two women have taught me, whether it's in the studio or outside of the studio, reign with me. Have been with me, and have been like the spine of my whole being from then until now. And like I teach this like things they have taught me. And I think it's just being really cautious that we do impact children's lives, and things sometimes that you think they're not listening to, they do listen to. It is hard though, because sometimes you want the best for a student and you want to push them, push them, push them, but they don't take it as positive pushing. So there is this fine line between finding that kid who can take it and who can, um, internalize push and motivation in a positive way and not in a negative way. But again, it depends on what the kid's home life is like. So it's being cautious as an instructor of like, okay, taking this kid as a whole. What is their home life like? What do maybe they struggle with mentally or personally? And being able to talk to them and treat them where it works with all of that. And I think a lot of teachers that don't work things out from their childhood, I think project a lot onto kids. And I've seen it happen when I was little. I see it happen now when I go and teach, and I see and I meet certain instructors, and it breaks my heart where I'm like, oh, you are just maybe mad or jealous that you didn't go move to LA or New York when post high school. So now you're taking it out on some of these girls that do want to go and pursue this. And you like kind of bully them as a 40, 50-year-old woman. I'm like, oh my God. And I know they maybe not intending on doing it. That's not their intention, but it does come off like that. And I see it. And so I think a lot of teachers need to maybe do more therapy to make sure they are in the right mindset to be able to teach and coach and motivate. That was one of my instructors. She would definitely bully me like that. I think she saw a flame in me, and she was just trying to just diminish it and blow it out. And, like she just would play games with me mentally and put me in the back of the corner. She like kicked me out of like a performing group one year to try and like make an example out of me. And it's like, that's not how you do that. Like if you can't get control of your other kids, don't make an example out of one. Like maybe get better skills to like gain control of your kids and not try and like diminish someone's fire. So I think there is a really big responsibility. And yeah, I mean, we're all going to make mistakes. Like, as time goes on, things become more and more, you know, talked about. So I think it's just treading carefully and knowing what type of kid you're actually dealing with, because sometimes you can be treating a kid how you see them at the studio like a certain way, but you don't know what the kid's dealing with back home.
Right.
And that can be kind of like, I think, a make or break it thing. And I owe it so much to Lisa and Courtney, because they took me as a whole into consideration while educating me my whole life. And I think that's why they did such a fantastic job with a lot of their kids.
Yeah, that's so important. It's such an important job. Those are such formative years, and you really
My
have to
God.
invest in your students. It's true. And so this might be a dumb question, but I'm just curious if you could sort of walk us through. I know you mentioned each day is completely different, but what's your day like? If you're working on like a big tour, or big project with an artist, what's your creative process like? Kind of how does all that work? Can you kind of give us like an inside look behind the scenes?
Yeah. As a dancer or a choreographer?
I would say as a choreographer, since that's what you're doing a lot of now.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool. So let's say the day, okay, so let's say you book a tour. A world tour process is unlike anything, and it's an experience that no dancer ever forgets. But telling it kind of from both sides. So let's say you get hired on a world tour with an artist. It's the most exciting day of your life, because you're just like, wow, I get to travel the world and do what I love and then get paid for it. I think that's the first thing. You're just like, wow, this is the coolest opportunity ever. And then once you get booked, you get your rehearsal schedule, and a lot of them vary as far as strenuous hours or weeks, but a typical, let's say, higher caliber tour, you're going to be rehearsing for this show for 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even before that if you do skeleton. So you're in the room, and you're paid a weekly, so your hours really don't matter. And you're there in a dance studio every day from Monday through Friday or Saturday with this core of dancers that you're about to travel the world with, and you're creating a show with the choreographers and artists in the room every day for 10 to 12, maybe 14, maybe 8 hours a day. And you're just dancing and learning and rehearsing and workshopping certain things to like create the show from the bottom to the top. And, then you're in the room with that artist band, which is like the coolest part once you start to get out of, you know, working off of a track and now you're working off the live tracks. It's just that to me is always like the big shift of like, oh wow, we're about to go on a world tour and dance on a stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people with a live band. And it's really, really, really hard because you're not in an environment most of the time, if it's a big tour, where, there's a sprung floor and there's mirrors and it's air conditioned. There's just not a perfect environment that can adhere to every department's needs. The band has to have a certain need to bring, a big enough doors to bring in all the equipment, have the ability to plug everything in. And, so like they do as best they can to make sure everyone's taken care of. But a lot of the times, who has to suffer? The dancers. It's concrete floor and the mirrors are this big and maybe they're like spread apart. So we are always the ones having to kind of like make it work, but that's just what it is. And a lot of kids these days like are really, I would say, prissy about it. And they're like, we don't have this, we don't have this. But it's like, that's just what it is. Like no one's trying to attack or make everyone's life miserable. Like put yourself in charge and see if something like a facility exists for everyone that's perfect. It doesn't. There's not a big enough dance studio that can fit a 20-person band and 50-person crew. Like it just doesn't exist. So it is that part, the rehearsal part, physically and mentally is just exhausting. You're learning 50 different versions of one song, and then you're auditioning them in front of the creative director, and then you're trying on costumes, and then certain pieces are getting cut, and then you're getting cut from certain numbers so you can make a quick change. It's just like chaos. But it's, to me, beautiful chaos. And if you can find the beauty in all of that, it is so fun. But tour is not made for everyone, and I think people do realize that once they get on tour, they're like, "Oh, this is not for me." And, there aren't, like, perfect limitations. Tours aren't union, so it's not like going to a movie set where you have a call time and a wrap time. Like, there are times where I've been at production rehearsals till 4 in the morning, making sure that this certain lift works, like, it's just what it is, and, again, it's not for the faint of heart, it's not for the babies, like, it is for the nitty-gritty performer that wants to do it, and you have to be ready for it, and I hear these horror stories of artists or for dancers now that they just expect to be treated like, you know, Angelina Jolie on an arena tour, and you're like, "What? That's not what you signed up for. What are you?"
Yeah.
And then now everyone hates you, and the management hates you, and artists hate you, and now they're never gonna wanna bring dancers out, so nice job. You just ruined it for everyone. But, it's just so fun, like, dancing all day, and then you get to, like, go and have a wardrobe fitting with some of the world's best stylists and that are dressing the artists and the dancers, and you're just constantly in this, like, awe of creating this masterpiece that will forever live in history, right? Like, people always reference the Red Tour, the Reputation Tour, the Prismatic Tour, the Man of the Woods Tour. It's like you get to be a part of this like moment in time, pop culture, and then you get to go on the road. And then at that point, like that section of time is done, and it's now you just get to travel the world with some of your closest friends, or that will be your closest friends for life, and this artist and this team of production people and band people, and you just travel the world with these humans, and you make these crazy memories performing in certain cities and countries that you've never been in, and then one day it's just over and that's the last show, and then you go home and you start from square one.
My gosh.
It's this like crazy thing I'll never forget when I did the Super Bowl actually 9 years ago with Katy Perry, and we worked for 3 months on this show, and we go and we do the show, and then we went home that next morning, and and then that day you're on cloud nine because you're getting all these texts and calls from everyone. And then that night I went to bed. And then that next morning I woke up and I go, oh God, I got to go back to work. I got to go back
Yeah.
to an audition next to, you know, Sally from Indiana that just moved out here, and we're auditioning for the same thing. And then no one in the room knows I really did the Super Bowl, but I am back. And it's just kind of like, it just is done. And then that's
You
that.
turn back into a pumpkin. Yeah.
Yeah. I like was dancing at the Super Bowl on a Sunday night, and then Tuesday afternoon, I was back again waitressing at the local bar.
What a
And
crazy ride. Yeah.
it's so crazy, but it's like that's just kind of what it is. And you're like serving tables like, "Hi, yeah, I just did the Super Bowl 2 days ago. Yes, I was there. Yes, I was dancing behind Katy Perry. Yeah, but here is your cocktail and here is your appetizer." Like
Yeah, exactly.
it's hilarious. Yeah.
That's so funny. That's so
Yeah.
cool to hear about. I mean, it sounds like such an insane amount of hard work, but from the outside, it also sounds like so much fun. And I'm sure, I got chills when you said you're a part of a moment in pop culture. That's so huge. And it sounds
Yeah.
like so much work and so much fun. Um,
Yes.
I was also curious because you've worked on so many different projects, music videos, tours, award shows, things like that. Is there a project that stands out, or maybe an artist that stands out as just something that when you look back on your career, is just like a really great memory or something that you're really happy that you did?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that I was able to create with Halsey is a moment of time that is so precious to me, because you always try, as creatives or as people who create or are artistic and things, you always yearn to find someone who A can understand your crazy visions, or B wants to even entertain them. And as a creator, you just kind of always, you just feel alone sometimes. You just kind of like feel crazy, which is a blessing and a curse. And when I met Ashley, we creatively just saw eye to eye. It was this like harmonious synchronization of brain and heart and soul, and we just saw the same thing. And I think a lot of times when you're on a creative project, you're trying to make other people understand your creative vision, and that's like the hardest part of these jobs. Like, it doesn't matter how creative you are, the expertise in being a creative is how you explain it to people, and can you get your vision across, and can you sell it and explain it and communicate it well to get everyone else on the same page as you. And with Ashley, I think she struggled with that also. She is so creative, and she just constantly was was hiring creatives that kind of didn't see what she saw. So it was this frustration on her end of just like, I have this clear vision of what I want to do or how I want to perform this show for an award show, but like no one really understood what she was trying to explain. And so when we met and crossed paths, it was like we both were just like this with one another. And I knew exactly what she wanted to do and how she wanted to, showcase her art and her song and her music and her performances. So working together hand in hand with her for, those 4 or 5 years was just magic. And yes, it had extremes, highs and lows of getting things done. But when we were at the end of our collaboration with one another, I was just dealing with an injury from dancing, and I have a really bad neck injury from just years of touring and doing head whips and sleeping on buses and trains like this, and just bad damage to my spine. So I was at the end of my dance career as she knew, and I wasn't really performing much anymore because I was in a lot of pain. And she wanted to do this performance at the AMAs to this her song Graveyard, and she wanted to, she's a painter, and she wanted to do this thing with paint, and that's all she gave me. She was like, I just want to do something with paint. And I thought of this creative with her of what we would do with paint. And then she was like, but I want you to be, she's like, I want one dancer and I just want paint. And I was entertaining this idea with one dancer and this paint. And we thought of this whole thing. And then she's like, yeah, but I want you to dance it. And I'll never forget the day that she asked me. We were at the CMAs and I was creative producing for the Country Music Awards. And I was like we were at Bridgestone Arena, and I was at front of house with all of the directors and executive producers. And she was on stage sound checking with Lady Antebellum. And so she was there with something else, but we also worked on the side together. And my assistant Scott would, run back and forth and give notes to Lady A or Halsey. And Scott, I just saw him running, and it was a very long run. And he ran, and he had this weird look on his face. And I was like, what's wrong? And he was just shooting the shit up with Halsey on stage for a little bit before we did the next run. And the song starts, they start to sound check. And he goes, Halsey just asked me if you would maybe be interested in dancing the Graveyard performance for the AMAs. And he goes, and this is when my neck was bad, like it was in a really bad place. And he goes, and I just got so nervous, I didn't even know what to say because I know how much pain you're in and how you're in and out of the doctor and PT all the time. He's like, but like, holy shit, Dani, like what? And I go, what did you say? And he's like, I just said, I don't know. I go, oh, can I do it? He's like, well, if you're going to choreograph it, like might as well do it. Cause then you can just at least make it easy enough for you. It's not like you're going to be giving yourself moves that you can't do. And I was like, you're right. And meanwhile, I'm like trying to do my like creative direction job. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to be dancing in like 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh God. And I just started to spiral. And then we were like me and her were playing like phone telephone game with Scott, making
like
him run
running
back. Yes. But I'm also like, why can't we just talk about this after? But she was like so excited, I think, to have me do this. And she knew the whole road I was going on with my neck. So, so I wound up doing it. And it was just a really emotional process because as a choreographer, as a choreographer wanted to create all these things for me as the dancer to do, but I was so limited physically. So it was like this struggle all week of like, wanting to quit, wanting another friend of mine to do it. And, it was as I was, creative directing it with Ashley, then I was choreographing it, and then I was dancing it. So it was wearing all these certain hats and not letting my, my physical injury take precedent, which it did a lot of the time, majority of the time. So it was this like little like demon that I was having to deal with. And I was like, don't let it ruin the process. Don't let it ruin the process or the project. So looking back on it, I wish I could have done so many more moves. And again, I had more time to create more, but that is the beauty of creating these things. You get a limited time and you get a limited budget to be able to create these pieces. And it is that of like a reality show. It's like you get 4 days, $4, 2 rooms, 2 dancers. Like that's how I look at it all the time. And it's like, what can she create? But it was one of the most beautiful performances I've ever gotten to do, and I think will do, because it was just me and Ashley on stage, and it was so emotional, and it was just so special. And yeah, it took every ounce of me, and I gave it every ounce of me, and I just I'm forever just so proud of that one.
That performance was absolutely gorgeous. I watched the
Okay.
whole thing, and you couldn't even tell that you were dealing with a neck injury, and knowing now that you had that injury while you were doing it just makes it even more
Oh, I
impressive.
was on so many steroids. I took like 17 leaves. My stomach was like bleeding and
Oh,
like,
no.
and then it's like, oh yeah, your neck's fucked and you created it and this and that. And then like, it's with paint and you can never really do it full out with the paint because there's no going back from after you do it. So we didn't get to do the paint until the performance. And we're slipping and like one of the buckets, if you watch it now back and if whoever's listening, one of the buckets that they said was going to have paint in it, then didn't have the paint in it for the end bit.
Oh,
So you
no.
see me at one point grab a bucket and go to throw it, and I'm like, it's fucking empty. Like, why did you put the paint in the bucket? So I toss the empty bucket and then grab another one and cross my fingers and hopes there's paint in it. So it's just like a chaotic, like masterpiece. Like it's just beautiful chaos. But I don't regret it for one bit, and it's a really great memory of mine working with Ashley. And I would say that point in time with her was just really fun to put together so many performances that artists would never even entertain ideas of creatives. And she was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get crazy. Let's break the mold. Like she always wanted to push the norm where a lot of people nowadays they don't. They want to take the safe route. They want to only do ideas that have references to them and they only want to create things that kind of have been done before because there's something to be said for it. Everyone is so scared to do anything new or innovative. So I loved working with her. She was like, if there's no reference to it, that means we have to do it. Where now it's like, well, if there's no reference, let's not do that. So
Yeah. Yeah, she's amazing. She's so talented and creative. Her work is incredible, and your work together is incredible too. It's so
thanks.
cool to hear the behind the scenes stories of how that all came together. And, speaking of new and innovative, is there anything that you have in the works right now that you can share? Anything that's on tap next?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have been working on a movie with Anne Hathaway. Well, one of the movies I didn't really work with her, but I worked with an actor named Nick Galitzine. It's coming out. It's closing South by Southwest this year, so it should be out. I think in the spring, in May maybe. It's called Idea of You. That was fun, but this new one that we've been working on, it's called Mother Mary, and it's directed by David Lowry, and it's an A24 film. And Anne Hathaway, all I can say is this huge pop star, bigger than life pop star, and it's with Michaela Cole, and it is an all female cast. And it is just a masterpiece, and we've been working on it for a year now, and then we're finishing it in July this year because the strike kind of messed up the scheduling of finishing it in the fall. So we're picking it up back in the summer. But it is a beautiful, beautiful film that has tons of dance. Just it's a full art masterpiece, and I'm very excited to finish that movie and have that come out for the world to see.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see that movie. And you're doing choreography and creative direction for that?
Yes, choreography, and then yes, some creative stuff with David. Yes, but yeah,
Amazing.
there's a bunch of beautiful choreography that is all over the film, which is a dream.
Oh, wow. I can't wait. We'll keep a lookout, and all of our
Yeah,
listeners, I'm sure, will be excited too. So thanks for sharing that.
yeah, of course.
And I know we're coming toward the end of the hour. We do have a section on the podcast called Petite Allegro, where it's just a bunch of
Woo!
rapid fire questions. So if you're okay with doing that.
Yeah, let's do it. I love
Awesome.
Tito Allegro.
It's my least favorite in class, actually, but it's a
I don't
fun
know why I like it so much. I think because it's fast, it's just kind of over. But yeah, it does
Yes.
kill me.
So I'm curious whether you're dancing or, creative directing or choreographing. What's the one item that you can't be without that's always in your bag at every rehearsal?
Um, a candle or Palo Santo. I need that in the room. I just always need to have it, whether I'm creating or I just need like a quick and I'm not like a crazy person like that, but I just that smell, it just is like a clean slate, so I could just think clearly, I think.
Yeah, it's just cleansing when it's that beautiful chaos that you mentioned. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
great.
yes.
Is there an artist that you've always wanted to work with but haven't yet?
Oof, yes, I wanna work with Miley Cyrus so bad. I literally want a Miley Cyrus Danny moment. I think we would, like, really create some cool stuff. Yeah.
I think so too. All right, well, it's out there, so hopefully it
Okay.
happens soon. And then we talked about teachers, is there a teacher who's inspired you or given you the best career advice that you can share?
Tanisha Scott and Mandy Moore, both of them. They are just such powerful, amazing, trailblazing women, and I love them because what I admire in them is that they're off the radar. Like they don't. I really strongly dislike choreographers who think they are these celebrities and the way they kind of capitalize off of certain things. It's not about like you become a choreographer because it's not about you. You become a choreographer to go into the shadows and go behind the camera and help other people be stars. So I personally just don't like when choreographers make it all about them. I think again, it goes back to the whole audition thing. Like I'm just not that person. And I love that Mandy Moore and Marguerite and Tanisha Scott, them three specifically, they aren't this type of choreographer, but their work speaks for itself. Their work is, you know, the the superstar. And I love that they just kind of dip behind the shadows and they create the most epic shit, but they don't have to brag or boast about it. And I think they've always told me that you just, you keep your head down and it's about the work. It's about the work, it's about the project, and it's about the artists in the room. It's not about us. And they've always taught that, they've preached that in the room, and that just runs through my veins, and I forever will live that mentality.
Yeah, I love that. It is about the work and you gotta get the ego out of the way, so that's good advice.
Yeah.
Do you have any funny backstage or behind the scenes memories from tours or projects that you've worked on that you can share?
Oh my god, so many, so many, so many. Oh my god. Everything is funny. Everything is funny. I mean, there's just, like, so many funny things where, like, you sometimes have to turn to your friend and be like, "Is this actually happening or is this, like, an alternate reality?" Like, there's
Right.
things like that. I think one of the funniest ones that just comes to my mind now, and I know when we get off this call, I'm gonna, like, think of so many more. But I was dancing for the Latin Grammys with it was Fifth Harmony and some other Latin male star. I forget his name. And Tanisha Scott was the choreographer, and we made up this whole dance, and it was like time to come out. Like, the guy would sing up in the ceiling, and he'd come down, and then us dancer girls would come out. We'd surround him. We'd unclip him from his harness. At that time, Fifth Harmony would be singing while we were doing that, and then Fifth Harmony would come join him. While then we replaced Fifth Harmony in these like little silhouette boxes. So it was like fairly simple. We had a specific time to come out, do our little thing. It was very much again not about us, just kind of filling the space of energy. So it's the Latin Grammys, which is always just a mess of an award show because there's so many performances, there's so many artists, guest artists, there's so many. It's just like a production nightmare. So you already know what you're signing up for, and we're waiting backstage. And I remember we had like our talent chauffeur, like our person that would like be our babysitter basically, like knew when to take us from our dressing room to certain points and get us onto stage. And at this point, we knew the flow of show, like the show flow. And I knew we were like behind this one artist, whatever this artist was. And I knew, we all knew once we heard this song, we were supposed to be backstage in our preset positions. All of a sudden, like we start hearing the song, but we're in our dressing room. And I'm like, shouldn't we be backstage? Like, aren't we next? And there's only like four or five of us at the top, like dancers. And we're like, yeah, I think we should, maybe they're going to like a commercial break or something. But like, where's our lady to come take us to stage? And we're just like sitting there. And all of a sudden I'm like, guys, I think we should just maybe meander in the hallway and like, and everyone's speaking Spanish and none of us spoke like fluent enough Spanish to like communicate that we probably need to be somewhere that no one's brought us. So we're like in these crazy costumes, like walking around backstage and everyone's yelling at us, like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Because we didn't have our babysitter. And we're like, no, 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 I think we're on next. And so we're like trying to communicate that no one got us to bring us to stage. And all of a sudden we hear our song and
Oh
the
my
song
God.
starts. And we are like, holy shit. Like we were supposed to be on stage. At this point, we're running frantic. Now everyone thinks we're crazy because no one knows what to do with us because no one knows like who we are. And we're like, oh,
Right.
we're supposed to be on stage. Finally, out of nowhere, our babysitter comes up and she's like crying. I don't know if something else happened with another performance. And she grabs us and she's like, go, go. The song is halfway over. The gentleman that we were supposed to unclip is still clipped into his little
Oh my
rag. And then I think it lives somewhere online, but we ran on so late, and you see us running on and we're just like trying to dance, and then the song was over. It was done.
Oh my,
And
story just raised my heart rate.
we left stage like, oh, but like Tanisha knew it wasn't our fault. And
Yeah.
when we all were in tears. We're like, oh my God, we're going to get fired. We're going to get blacklisted. Like, holy shit. And we leave stage and she comes running out this other area and she's just dying laughing. She's like, guys, it's all good. Collect the check and let's just keep it moving. And I'll never forget that because she was so cool. She knew what happened. We tried our hardest, but like that feeling of hearing the song be on in the MGM arena and we're like in the backstage area. I was like, oh God. Oh my God. I felt so
Stress.
sick. Distress.
What a roller coaster. It's a good story. What's your favorite thing about Ohio that you miss living in LA?
I miss the people. I miss the people here. I miss how nice everyone is. I miss going to a grocery store and people just, if you lock eyes with someone, they go, hi. And you're like, hi. I just miss that like family feeling of going out in public and not feeling just alone. I just love walking on a path or on a sidewalk and people just say hi to you. And that doesn't exist in LA. And I miss that. And I feel like time is slower here. And it's nice because I get to like slow down myself and actually take time for things that I don't, I think, appreciate and nourish in California, like going for nightly walks or, you know, just certain things that California just doesn't have. And it's nice to slow down and appreciate what's around you and the people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so nice. You go back to Ohio and it feels like nothing has changed in 10 years. It's such a nice feeling.
It's like a time warp. Yeah. It's just so comforting. Yeah.
It is. And then
Yeah.
the last question I always ask everyone who comes on, but in a perfect world, what would the dance industry look like or what would you want it to be?
I love that question. I think in a perfect world, I would love dancers to have more professionalism in how they speak because I think until that happens, it's hard for people to take dancers seriously. And then I hope that people who hire dancers start taking dancers and what we do and how, what we bring to performances. I want them to be able then to see what we bring to culture as a whole, movies, TV shows, performances, tours, music, everything. And there's like nothing that dance exists in everything, whether there are dancers or they're not dancers. It exists in movies between camera and actor. Like it exists in everything. And I want people to appreciate and respect dance and choreography more. And I think that also starts with just dancers and choreographers also just not having this. And again, we have a chip on our shoulder, I think, for how we've been treated for so long. And it's so correct. But I think if we can maybe just like love that chip and just not let it dictate how we say things, I think that'll help. And I would just love just more harmony and respect and appreciation for what performing arts does for the world, I think would be my goal and hope.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope for that too. And thank you so much for contributing to those changes. You've made such a big
of course.
difference for the dance world. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you on social media?
Yeah. Follow me on Instagram, I think is my only used thing. It's at Dani Vitale on Instagram. And I try and post work and stuff there. I would say Instagram is the most used thing. But yeah, I have like a YouTube and a Vimeo and things like that. But Instagram is where I live mostly.
Cool. Awesome. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. And Danny, thank you so much for
Perfect.
taking the time to speak with me. This has been
Elizabeth,
so much
thank you so
fun.
much. It is so incredible that you do things like this and ask these amazing questions. So, thank you for having me. I'm really appreciative and I feel honored.
How cool is it to hear from Dani Vitale? I've been following her work for a while, and I was so happy to have her on the podcast and share some of her story with you. She was so kind and generous with her time, and I learned so much about areas of the dance world that I didn't know much about. I'll include a link to her Instagram in the show notes if you want to connect with her, as well as a YouTube link to the Halsey performance at the 2019 AMAs that Dani talked about, because I just think everybody needs to see that. It was such a cool performance. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning into this episode, and thanks to Dani for spending time with us. We have a mid-March episode that I'm so excited about because it's the 10th episode of this podcast. I'm so grateful to all of you for sticking with this podcast for 10 episodes and for the community that's formed around these conversations. We have another great guest in the studio on Tuesday, March 19th, who's also from Ohio. I love that March is the month to interview dancers from my home state. It warms my heart. You're going to love this interview, so stay tuned. In the meantime, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can connect with me on Instagram at eblosfield or send me an email at theadultballetstudio@gmail.com. Links to those contact methods are in the show notes as well. Happy dancing, everybody, and see you at the bar.